Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Will the Browns keep 4 quarterbacks this year is a question on a lot of people's minds. Now, I don't know why the number being 4 opposed to 3 seems to have broken everybody's brains, but this has become a massive debate. Will the Browns keep 4 quarterbacks? Will they keep an extra body in that quarterback room this year versus what they have done in years past? I really don't think this is impossible. Do I think it's likely? I don't know, right? But I really don't think it's impossible the way that some people present it. I think you can field a roster pretty easily with 4 quarterbacks in the room. I don't think it's impossible to be able to keep guys that you want to keep on this roster while also keeping 4 quarterbacks, right? Last year, the Browns were able to do this throughout their initial 53 cut because they thought that somebody was going to trade for Tyler Huntley or Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and that never ended up materializing, right? Because they kept Deshaun, Tyler, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jameis Winston last year. They were still able to keep a ton of offensive linemen, a ton of defensive linemen, 6 corners and 5 safeties and 6 linebackers. It's not impossible is what I'm saying, the way that people make it seem whenever somebody brings up that the Browns might keep 4 quarterbacks. Do I think it's likely? Only reason I don't think it's likely is because it doesn't get done very often, but just because it doesn't get done very often doesn't mean that there aren't circumstances that would allow for it. And the Browns, the more and more this training camp goes, the more and more this feels like a special circumstance where you might keep 4 quarterbacks. So I don't think it's crazy, especially when you pay attention to what the layout of the Browns room has been and what the philosophy behind it has been for the Cleveland Browns, right? The idea, I think, from the very jump, or at least from after the draft on, was, hey, we're going to have Kenny Pickett. We're going to have Joe Flacco. If Kenny Pickett outperforms Joe Flacco in camp, Kenny Pickett's the starter because he's better than Joe Flacco, and better than Joe Flacco is probably in the better half of quarterbacks that the Cleveland Browns have had since 1999. Again, a very low bar, but we know that with that level of quarterback play, you can have hopes of being over 500 if Kenny Pickett is able to provide that. If Kenny Pickett is not able to provide that, which I think was very likely, and I'm pretty sure the Browns thought was more likely than not, right? They were just kind of hoping that Kenny Pickett could take that spot. But anyways, if Kenny Pickett could take that, Kenny Pickett can't overtake Joe Flacco during camp, and in my opinion, he has not done that so far, then you just start Joe Flacco. Now, what do you do with the odd man out? Well, if Kenny Pickett is better than Joe Flacco, then you got no reason to keep Joe Flacco. You cut him, you let him go somewhere else. Somebody else picks him up. You bring back Tyler Huntley on the practice squad, and then you just roll into the season with Tyler Huntley on the practice squad, Kenny Pickett as your starter, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders. And then if Joe Flacco is the one that outperforms Kenny Pickett throughout camp, then it's a similar ordeal. You keep Joe Flacco, you cut Kenny Pickett. Whether you do that after the first 53 or right before the season starts is up to you. But you can cut Kenny Pickett. Hopefully, you're going to try to get him back on the practice squad. If you can't get him back on the practice squad, you bring back Tyler Huntley. And then you roster Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, probably making Dylan Gabriel the backup. Shedeur is somebody that you're going to hope to give some time at the end of the season if necessary. So the layout of the room makes a lot of sense to me. I know there's a lot of controversy about it, but it makes a lot of sense to me. You got the 2 guys who you want to take the job right now, battling it out, and you have the 2 guys who are developing in the background, who I don't really think are competing with each other. I just think they're both developing in the background. And the Browns will have a watchful eye on both these guys' development and say to themselves, hey, which one's developing faster? If one's developing faster than the other, then that person's going to be prioritized. But it's kind of like planting seeds in a garden, right? You plant 2 seeds in a garden. Those plants aren't competing with each other, but you are keeping a watchful eye of like, hey, which one grows better? Which one with this technique grows? It's just the same thing but with quarterback, right? And you go on with that information as it presents itself to you. You can have the reason I bring up to if Kenny Pickett, let's say Joe Flacco is the starter, he gets announced as the starter at the joint practice, and Kenny Pickett is cut and then brought back on the practice squad. Well, why would we bring back Kenny Pickett on the practice squad? We've seen this done so many times before over the last few years with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, where Joe Flacco, let's say he gets injured during the game, you could throw out Dylan Gabriel to finish that game, right? Because that's what, the Browns believe he has the experience. He's played enough games so where if you had to throw him in a game, he could be more ready for that challenge than Shador. We'll see if that ends up being true, but that's what they feel. And you could finish the game with Dylan, but if you weren't ready to start Dylan for a game or start Shador for a game, you could say, hey, Joe Flacco's out. Let's elevate Kenny Pickett this week from the practice squad. Start him. He will play, and it will do the thing that we did with Joe Flacco, where you put him on the practice squad, you start him, you put him on the practice squad, you start him, you put him on the practice squad, you start him. We did this with Joe Flacco. We did this with PJ Walker. Every time we do it, people are like, oh, well, can't somebody sign the Browns starter? Yeah, but it takes the Browns starter saying, hey, I don't want to start. I want to be a backup somewhere else. And that never happened. So the Browns are probably going to do that if they could get Kenny Pickett on the practice squad. If they can't get Kenny Pickett on the practice squad, and then it's Tyler Huntley, I do think Tyler Huntley serves as more of an emergency quarterback. And then, if Joe Flacco goes down, then you decide who's more ready, Dylan or Shador, and then that person gets to start after that injury. So the room makes sense. I don't think this is that crazy of a quarterback room to me. I think there's a fair amount of bullshit you need to cut through to be able to see what the actual quarterback room is going to be, right? There was the initial bullshit about a four-way competition. And I know people said that Kevin said this, but it was coach speak. I think people were taking coach speak a bit literally. Every coach says, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to start. I mean, that's standard coach speech. If you ask if Myles Garrett's in a position battle to Jim Schwartz, he's going to say, yeah, everybody's going to get a chance to try to take the job from Myles Garrett. Don't mean Myles Garrett's job is in jeopardy, right? So there's a lot of bullshit to cut through, the four-way competition nonsense. The fact that the Browns now have, 6 or 7 guys technically on the roster. And all of that bullshit can cloudy up the picture and make it so that people who don't really cover the team, aren't really close to the team, can throw those things at you and really confuse you or confuse people and cloudy the image up, right? The amount of people I get messaging me about Deshaun Watson as if he is a factor in the Browns quarterback plans going forward is much more than is necessary. And it's not even that many people. It's just the fact that it's happening, I think, is very strange to me because it's very clear they have moved on from Deshaun Watson as much as they can move on at this point. They have listed him 6 on the depth chart. They are not even really spending any resources in his rehab. That's all Deshaun Watson right now. The team's not really invested in that. When I went to camp, Deshaun Watson was just out there working on his rehab with no trainers. All the trainers were with the actual guys on the team. Deshaun was just out there working by himself. Nobody there, no teammates talking to him. It was strange for sure, but it was definitely what was going on. So I don't think the team is invested in Deshaun Watson. I don't think they have any intention on letting him play again. I know there are some folks who are a little bit delusional about this, but the truth is that man's done. He's not going to play anymore. So that's piece of bullshit number one you got to cut through, right? Oh, well, Watson played. No, Watson ain't going to play. And Watson will probably be healthy next season. But even if Watson is healthy next season, probably not going to play him, right? If they can avoid playing him, unless he has to play in an emergency capacity, they will avoid playing him. I know he's being paid $46 million. I know he has a ton of money here, and people are like, well, you got to use it if you're going to spend that much money. The Browns have already just said to themselves, we lost. Okay? They have already said to themselves, that money's gone. It ain't coming back. There is no, they have let go of the sunk cost fallacy that is that Deshaun Watson contract. And they are moving on from it. They have made it clear. The owner has made it clear. The general manager has made it clear. It's clear that they're not dealing with that. Tyler Huntley is literally only here for emergency purposes, right? They needed an arm to throw in the preseason, and while they can keep 90 guys on the roster, they're just going to keep another body there just in case anything else pops up, or if they get an injury during the preseason game, they don't have to, like, let's say Dylan Gabriel goes out there and, like, knock on wood, I don't wish injury on anybody, but let's say Dylan Gabriel goes out there second, right? Shador plays the first half, Dylan Gabriel goes out there second, and then he gets injured. The Browns would rather just be like, all right, well, Dylan's out. Let's just throw Tyler Huntley in instead of going back to Shador and making him work even more, risking him to injury when they have plans to roster him, right? So that's what Tyler Huntley is there for, potentially make the practice squad, but definitely not a factor unless, like, there's, like, some rare circumstance that, like, the Browns want to run a lot of RPO run stuff and they want to keep Tyler Huntley on the team. Maybe that's how they end up at 4 quarterbacks, if they see Tyler Huntley as a gadget guy, but I don't think that that's where we're going to be at, right? I think they have tried the gadget guy stuff with DTR. It hasn't worked. They've tried it with Josh Dobbs. I don't see Tyler Huntley as so tempting that they feel the need to do that again, but we'll see. So, you got to cut through some of that nonsense, right? People telling you it's a 6 quarterback room or what they're going to do with this guy, that guy. The only 4 people that matter right now are Kenny Pickett, are Joe Flacco, Shador Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel. Those are the only 4 people right now that matter. Anybody else is irrelevant to the conversation. Now, 4 is not 3. And again, 3 is the normal number of quarterbacks on the high end that you would keep. 4 is a little bit excessive, but you could certainly keep 4 and put together a fine roster. Who gets cut in this scenario? Now, I kind of already broke it down, right? Kenny Pickett, if he outplayed Joe Flacco in camp, then he becomes a starter. No reason for Joe Flacco to be here, right? And then obviously the other way around, if Joe Flacco has outperformed Kenny Pickett, what's really the purpose of having Kenny Pickett in there? Now, the Browns did invest a 5th-round pick, which makes me a little bit more hesitant to think that they're just going to straight up outright cut him, which is why I think, hey, if they could slide him onto the practice squad, they absolutely would do that. They might try to trade Kenny Pickett. I don't know who's trading for Kenny Pickett if he can't beat out Joe Flacco. Maybe somebody's going to do it. And again, I'm not the right person to really speculate on a trade for Kenny Pickett because I don't see the value. I didn't see the value when the Browns traded a 5th-round pick for him. So maybe I just don't like Kenny Pickett enough to understand why anybody would ever trade for Kenny Pickett. I'm willing to admit that, right? I'm not a Kenny Pickett guy. But maybe you could trade Kenny Pickett. I find it unrealistic. Same thing goes with, like, trading Dylan Gabriel. I've seen that one floated out there. And again, Dylan Gabriel, I think, had a lot more interest from NFL teams than people are assuming. I don't, like, if the Browns have made the calculation that between pick 94, where they selected Dylan, or the late first, I think it was 94, 97, right? But they decided that Dylan Gabriel was not going to make it to, what was it, pick 110 where they selected Dylan Sampson? Let me pull this up real quick. But yeah, they decided that Dylan Gabriel was not going to make it to pick 126. They had intel on that. I do think they're correct. I don't think Dylan Gabriel was going to make it to 126, which is why they took him in the 3rd round. There might be interest in Dylan, right? He's a really smart guy. Coaches seem to love him. He interviews well. And if he looks good in a couple preseason games, coaches can talk themselves into it. I think he's a guy that coaches can easily talk themselves into. And I think people underestimate that, right? As much as somebody like me will look at him and go, oh my God, he's too short. Oh my God, he has no special tools. coaches will look at somebody like Dillon Gabriel and say, oh my God, he's super coachable. Oh my God, look how smart he is. Look how well he's picked up different offenses throughout his college career. Look at the guys that he's worked with. Look at the people who speak highly of him. The best coaches in college football all speak very highly of Dillon Gabriel. You know, he's worked with great coaches every stop. All those coaches love Dillon Gabriel. That's going to be very attractive to NFL coaches. So maybe there is a market for Dillon Gabriel. Me personally, again, same thing as Kenny Pickett. I'm not the right guy to tell you what that market is because I don't even think that I would have drafted Dillon Gabriel where the Browns drafted him. I'm not somebody who would even remotely know what somebody who wants Dillon Gabriel would value Dillon Gabriel at. You got to talk to somebody who likes Kenny Pickett to know what he would be valued at. You got to talk to somebody who likes Dillon Gabriel to know what he'd be valued at. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not the guy. If I ran an NFL team, somebody called me about both these quarterbacks, I'm hanging up. But there might be somebody, and I'm not going to act like just because it's not for me, I don't understand the appeal of either of these quarterbacks, because clearly there is appeal there. There was a trade market for Dillon Gabriel. There was a trade market for Kenny Pickett. So clearly there is some reason to be interested in those guys. It's just not reasons that align with me personally. So maybe somebody gets traded, right? I think for Kenny Pickett, they would like to get something back for that, if possible. But I think if Joe Flacco wins the job, they're going to hang on to Kenny Pickett as long as possible to make a trade, right? If Kenny Pickett wins this job, they're just going to cut Joe Flacco. Because they can't put him on the practice squad and nobody's going to trade for Joe Flacco at this point, right? Like they're going to just wait for you to release him because you're more than likely going to release him. So that's kind of my walkthrough of the Cleveland Browns quarterback room. It sounds super sensational when you hear it. Oh my God, the Browns have 6 quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson's over there still. Is that Tyler Huntley over there? Oh my God, they got Shedeur Sanders. It seems so sensational. But if you boil this down to the basic points, it's not that different than most quarterback rooms. You got 2 veterans vying it out for the starting job. One of those guys are going to make the team. One of those guys probably going to get moved or cut. And then you got 2 guys you're developing to see, hey, maybe we got something, maybe we don't. That's what you do with 3rd and 5th round picks at any position, right? Especially late 3rd and 5th round picks, right? Like you're going to just say, hey, I hope something sprouts. But if nothing sprouts, it's not that big of a deal because, again, it's not like 3rd round picks have a 100% hit rate. And certainly 5th round picks don't have a 100% hit rate. They're just taking some shots here, developing these guys and seeing how far it goes. And look, for those of you worried that Dillon's not going to be able to play and we're not going to know what Dillon looks like on the field before we draft somebody, or that Shedeur's not going to be able to play, I have news for you. The Browns have played 25 seasons since they've returned in 1999. 22 of those seasons have seen 2 or more quarterbacks hit the field as starters for the Cleveland Browns. Joe Flacco has not started 17 games or 16 games a full season since 2017. I've been doing this job a long time. It took me a little while after I graduated college to get this platform going. The last time Joe Flacco started a full season, I was in college. Lamar Jackson was in college. Josh Allen was in college. Dalvin Cook was in college. Saquon Barkley was in college. Jalen Hurts was in college. Not Joey Bosa, but Nick Bosa was in college. That's how Jameis Winston was still on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's how long ago it's been since Joe Flacco has started 17 or 16 games. And Kenny Pickett has never started more than 12 games in a single season in his entire career, and that number's been going down as of late. So don't worry. Whoever wins this job is going to lose it at some point. You know, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, we're going to see Dillon Gabriel at some point. We're going to see Shedeur Sanders at some point. Both those young guys will see the field. The bigger question is like, will we see Joe Flacco? Will we see Kenny Pickett, in my opinion? Because, I think we see either or. Maybe there's a chance that we can see all four, but I think we see either or in a scenario where the season's not a disaster. So you're going to see these guys. They're going to get opportunities. The Browns have played four quarterbacks last year. They played 4 quarterbacks when they went 11 wins. It's going to happen. You're going to play multiple quarterbacks this season. More than likely, it is shaping up to be very likely for this football team. So don't worry. I know a lot of people are freaking out. When's my guy going to get their opportunity? The opportunity will be there, and that's why it's fortunate if you're a late round quarterback to be drafted in Cleveland, because now you're going to get the opportunity to play and prove yourself. So that's going to be what the situation is. I think this is a lot of noise to go around a quarterback situation. It's fairly standard for the situation the Browns are in. When you don't have a quarterback, you're going to try shit. And the Browns look like a team that's trying stuff at quarterback. We'll see if any of that stuff is successful, but this isn't strange. And that's my whole point. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.